Next on Digital Edge Live, ladies and gentlemen, one of the pioneers of user experience design in South Africa. From NATIVE VML, here's Jacqui Maroun.
Purpose is the energy source of user experience designers, or UX designers as we call ourselves. Our purpose is to get up in the morning and save the world from thoughtless design. And that might be a tangled navigation or an app that you don't know how to use or buttons that don't make sense. But really, it's about the user being innocent in those situations, and we feel unwitting and vulnerable. So the way we go about this is we go and get insights from users. We ask them questions and understand what their needs are so that we can validate the assumptions that we're making when we design for them, and as a result of that, create experiences that are valuable in their lives. But there's a new marketing paradigm emerging that we're all aware of, and what it's doing for UX designers is it's drawing us into the world of customers. And customers are really the same as users. Their interface is a business or a brand rather than a system. And we see the same pattern of vulnerability when we talk to customers. And that's not a very popular thing to say, perhaps, in the world of consumer power, and consumers have a voice, and they do, and it's getting there, but there still is this underdog mentality where the customer is actually expecting to lose at the end of the day. And some get it right, but often we see that they're not winning when they're dealing with businesses or brands. So I shouldn't have been surprised when I went out to do what enthusiastic UX designers do, and when I got the brief for this talk, I went and spoke to people who aren't in our industry, who know nothing about marketing. And I said to them, what does purposeful marketing mean to you? What does purpose in business look like or feel like? And I was expecting naively to dive into visions of business transforming the world that we live in, turning the marginalized people in areas of our country into thriving, sustainable communities. But the conversations that I got were mostly sad and angry. And what I realized is that customers are feeling marginalized in our world. And these are everyday folk who are just going about their business. They're just trying to get stuff done. And they deserve the very best care from our businesses. But they are feeling hard done by, slighted, even abused or ripped off by the retailers, telecoms, banks, airlines, you name it. And the example of the Criollo bubbles is, I think, a good illustration of that. And what we have to realize in South Africa is that that frustration with businesses happens on top of a really high threshold of frustration directed at our parastatals and government departments around energy and water and e-tolls and so on. So customers really do feel it quite harshly, and I listen to a lot of anger and ranting. And realize that South Africans, if we're not careful, might not resonate with strong social values in our brands if they are not directly experiencing that from the companies themselves and feeling aligned with that. So the point and the insight from this is really that charity begins at home. And for everyone here who has customers or is talking to customers, we should be doing good for our customers first before we go out there and do good. And once we've done that, we can then really start looking at purpose in the world. So a purpose-driven brand is geared towards attracting customers that share its values. And that creates real relationship and bonding and a powerful connection that is very useful in doing good. But we need to equally align those values in our customers' experiences and treat that as the first line of vulnerability in our purpose work. So can we meet customers' needs? Can we build their lives up and really give them value, make them feel valued, and love them with all of your brand's heart? For me, that is the starting point of purposeful marketing. Then, once those underdogs have won on the home front, we can broaden the purpose out to the disenfranchised and unrepresented underdogs out there who need a break. So these are the people or communities or creatures or environments that really might never be your customer, but they are equally worthy beneficiaries of the resources that businesses create. So then how do we reach them and identify them? The second part of the conversation that deals with this, that came up when I spoke to people, is that they knew of companies that are doing purposeful work, and the kinds of projects that they describe to me are typically what we would see as CSI work or social responsibility. And they felt that these projects were plugged onto the side of the business somewhere, and that they sometimes feel their actual money is being used to fund these projects, but they had no way of feeling involved in that experience, and really felt deprived of the joy of giving and being involved in something kind. So they were missing out on the party, and it was a classic FOMO discussion. And I started thinking, what is this pleasure that is derived from kindness, and that when you held back from that pleasure, you get FOMO? What is this dynamic that's going on? So let me tell you about a pet experiment that I do when I'm stuck in really heavy traffic. And if you can imagine a long stream of cars that you're sitting in, and there's a side lane of cars that's trying to merge in, and there's a solidarity going on where the stream of cars is not letting anyone in, and the taxis are sort of up a street pole trying to get in. And you might think my life is very dull, but what I do is I let someone in, even if it's a taxi. And for me, this is the most exciting thing, because what happens in my rearview mirror is that every car behind me starts letting someone in. And that continues for ages, and I just feel so self-righteous maybe, but proud of the fact that I created a bit of kindness in the world. And it's often made me wonder if kindness is contagious. Or are we just sheeple and follow what the person in front of us is doing? Another example that caught my eye, because I was thinking about this, is the ripple effect that was created by the Starbucks Pay It Forward bonanza that happened quite recently. I'm not sure if any of you saw it in social media, but there was a person at a Starbucks drive-thru who bought a coffee in the morning and paid for an extra coffee for the person behind them. And that created a chain reaction of people buying coffee for the person behind them for the next 10 hours. There were 378 people who participated in this. And in the context of thinking about, is kindness contagious, I wanted to look at this a bit more closely and see if I could glean an insight that we could use in experience design around this. And I found an article written for Fast Company by Jason Pfeiffer, who did some research into this incident to see what actually happened. And what he realized is that the first person who gave the $5 extra for the second cup of coffee was the only person who put money into the system. So it wasn't a classic pay it forward. Everyone just used the money that they were going to buy their coffee with to buy the next person a coffee. And so actually, after these 378 people, the last person just said, you know what, not really interested, I'll just buy my own coffee, thanks. So he didn't get a free coffee at the end, even though everyone called him a cheap ass. But the way Jason describes this is quite funny, in that he says that actually this is not a story of paying it forward. It got sensationalized as such, and this contagion. But actually it's a story about the world's smallest escrow account, of that $5 just being funding that chain reaction. But cynicism aside, even though that wasn't as amazing a thing as I thought it was when I first read it, there was nevertheless an example of 378 people choosing to do something kind over not. And there was no financial investment for them, but they could choose to say no, but it felt better to be kind. And I wanted to explore this more, because kindness seems pleasurable, it seems contagious, and, oh, thank you, James. And I wanted to check what the psychologists were saying about this. Has there been research into what this dynamic actually is? And it turns out that psychological studies actually agree. And they've done studies that show that if someone receives an act of kindness towards themselves, or if they even just witness an act of kindness, it creates a propensity to do good, to go out and do good yourself. And this dynamic is called moral elevation. And it's the emotion or the dynamic where you're inspired to be a better person by seeing an act of good. And then when you do an act of good, that sense of moral elevation compounds. That's my feeling in the traffic that I love so much. And this is, in fact, the contagion that can spread. And moral elevation is a really interesting topic to Google. There's a lot of research done in the context of religion and politics, which I stayed away from. It's a thorny place. But in terms of simple acts of kindness, what they associated with moral elevation is also a physical sensation. People actually feel a tingling sensation in their chest area, which I would associate with the heart, of being involved in something like this. And they measured memory of acts of kindness. And does someone remember doing good more than they remember having good done to them? And the studies show that that memory is retained for longer. So there's definitely something important in our psychological makeup that thrives on doing good and being kind, that I think that that we can use to better the world that we live in if we can tap into that correctly. Another example closer to home is a very humble little program that I think illustrates some very important points. And that's the My School, My Village, My Planet card. It's a very perhaps mundane mechanic. You swipe your card. Mine is linked to my Woolies. I use it at Woolies. It's linked to many retailers. You swipe it when you buy something. But there are two things that this card does, or this little program does, that I think are key in tapping into these insights. Number one, they allow me to link to an organization that is important to me. So you can link to a school or a charity or any organization that you resonate with. And mine is linked to Free Me, which is a wildlife rehabilitation center that takes in baby birds and hurt wild animals and heals them and releases them. So I feel very strongly about this. So already there's a resonant connection for me with this card. The second thing that they do is every month they send me a statement. And they say, this is how much you've spent on your card, which is alarming. And the second part is, this is how much everyone who's contributing to Free Me has managed to raise this month by using your cards. And last month, that totaled 8,000 Rand, which is not a lot of money in the big scheme of things. But I know Free Me, and I know how far that money would go for them. And I'm overjoyed when I see that. And it creates this real sense of gratitude towards Woolies and this card scheme, where I think, thank you for letting me be a part of the system that makes me feel so good. And it didn't take any financial burden from me, and I just was able to participate in my course of my normal life. So, and I remember that feeling when I used that card. So I just wanted to shout out to that because I think it illustrates those points really nicely. So I've spoken about two insights. The first insight is that people want you to do good for them first as customers. And they will almost block a purposeful attempt more broadly if they don't feel that they're getting that justice at home. The second insight is that people want to be in on the action of doing good. It feels great and they want to be part of that party. And then the third insight is what comes out of these dynamics, and that is that it is contagious. It is a perpetual cycle that we can really build on and use. So as an experienced designer, if I'm looking at designing experiences that allow for good to be done, I'm really trying to draw on these insights. And that is that your customer has to be at the center of that strategy. They're a powerful resource in doing good, and not just their money, although ultimately that probably does fund some of it, but the actual human being that is your customer. If your business's resources are geared towards doing good for your customer, and you can create ways for your customer to then pay that forward into their communities for the people and creatures and environments that they really care about and are passionate about, I think that's a very viable model. And so putting the customer at the center of your strategy for doing good becomes a sustainable engine. And it's an engine of feeling good from doing good, And that, I think, is very attractive to non-customers who look in and say, I want to be part of that, which then talks to the marketing strategy that I think this makes sense as a part of. So what you end up with is a picture of shared value between business and customer, and shared values because you're working towards the same goals together. But at the very heart of it, it's that customer who really feels that they are truly, truly valued by the business. Thank you.